surprised that she completely forgot that she was at an official meeting. After that, the Duke and Duchess began to be merciful, which drove the young mage into despondency. The Duke immediately decided to note that this marriage would not be a union of families, and the Netri would not help with expeditions. The Baron apologized for his behavior and thought to himself that in this case this marriage would be useless. The lady forgave him for this mistake because it was the first time the Duke had called her by her first name. The Marquis noticed that during the Duke's absence from the expeditions, their region was flooded with various monsters. According to him, Schuer guessed that the events of the novel began to come true little by little. So far, there were many monsters, but they did not pose a critical level of danger. Although even in the original, the main characters realized the danger of the North only after the attack on the central region. However, Schuer knew that they could not be relied upon judging by the events of the original novel. The Marquise insisted that it was necessary to at least try to establish some kind of connection with the center, to which the Duchess remarked that after so long, even if they sent some help, those people would not know the North better than the Duke. The girl noted that she understands this like no one else, because her family has always been engaged only in the affairs of the center. Their support would not help much, because it was impossible to allow the Duke and Irina to meet. The man fell in love with her at first sight, but after her wedding, she lost the remnants of her feelings forever. If Irina arrives, then it is urgent to help the Duke return emotions before their meeting, so that he can make informed decisions. The girl was worried that the Duke would go on an expedition and be absent for a long time. However, John said that he had prepared bouquets of flowers in advance and had already delivered them all. Mage Riley was interested in how Reynold planned to get rid of a year of accumulating monsters in a single march. He noted that in the future, the Duchess would be upset if the marriage registration had to be postponed. The Duke listened to his words and noticed the upset Schuer next to him. After that, he took a deep breath and realized that he would have to take her wishes into account. It was the first time Riley had seen the Duke so exhausted and could feel a strange energy coming from the garden. Therefore, he promised that after the end of the expedition, he would look after the North and allow them to go to the center. He explained this by the fact that he himself was tired of constantly sitting in the tower. The Duchess immediately began to thank him for allowing them to be together. The girl asked the wizard how much time they would have to rest. However, she noticed that a week would not be enough to relax and deal with the magic in the garden. She admitted that she is going to grow even more different plants. After that, the wizard agreed to 2 weeks of rest, but the Duchess insisted on 3. She was very happy when the wizard finally agreed to give them 4 whole weeks. After that, the Duke proposed that this meeting and the meeting be considered over. Everyone began to pack up and went for a walk around the estate. First of all, our heroine went to look at the fence that the knights made for her. She was very beautiful and looked sturdy enough to stand on her own. Just at that time, the knights who were carrying boxes of equipment in their hands approached. They asked if the new lady liked their wooden fence. The girl admitted that they did even better than she imagined. They also brought the Duke's wooden sword from sparring with John, which they had been asked for. One of the knights admitted that he took it immediately after the battle, so this is the one. The maid noticed that handicraft takes a lot of time, so their furniture will come a little later. At this time, the knights finished setting up the fence and asked if any more help was needed. The girl admitted that she wanted to put the very first gift of the Duke there in order to keep it. She asked the knights to tell her the story of how her future husband went on expeditions, and at this time, he was sitting in his office and engaged in state affairs. The wizard lay on the sofa and talked about the character of the future Duchess. Reynold noticed that this strange girl was not shy at all. It seemed strange to the wizard that the Duke had ended the meeting so quickly. So he asked how soon they were going to go on an expedition. Reynold wondered why the wizard was sitting in his office instead of going home. Riley admitted that he just decided to wait here if he was going to look after the garden anyway. The Duke called it suspicious because usually a wizard likes to sit in his tower and not go anywhere. However, he noted that he had made an exception because of the magical energy from the garden. After that, the Duke realized that it was useless to argue with the wizard. Suddenly, Riley had a hunch, so he addressed the man in a very gentle and affectionate voice. He decided to check if the Grand Duke of the North had his emotions returned. After that, the boy took advantage of the magic circle and went to the future Duchess because it was more interesting for him to be with her. A sudden gust of wind scattered all the papers and left a mess after he left. The Duke was also annoyed by the fact that he heard conversations in the street between the knights and his future wife. Schuer continued to take care of the garden and equip a fence for the camellia. The girl did not notice at all at what moment the wizard was next to her. He admitted that he felt a strange magical energy, so he came to take a look. Riley noticed that it was coming from a small branch of the camellia that had been stuck in the ground. Although the flow of energy itself was very weak, it could be clearly felt. Therefore, the future Duchess pretended that she was only engaged in the fence. She suggested that the wizard inspect anything but this place, even though there was nothing else. But the girl was very interested in whether the wizard had magic stones that controlled temperature. She explained that she would need stones to grow trees in the garden. The wizard remarked that he would like to get something in return for his help. After all, in fact, magic stones that control temperature are very rare. Schuer knew that not everyone could make a magic stone, and their number was limited. There were even fewer people who were able to imbue these stones with power, but that was not the case for the master of the magic tower. The girl noticed that her family's flowers were quite famous throughout the empire. Therefore, she offered to give her first flowers to the wizard for help. She knew that Riley didn't believe her, so she asked to take a look at the camellia she had planted. She showed that the flower she had planted now had to take root in the northern land. The wizard was sure that the power of the family was inherited by Netri's younger sister. The future Duchess asked not to pretend because she knew that the wizard perfectly felt her own power. She said that the camellia planted by her hands glows even at night. The girl offered to check with the maid if the wizard did not trust her. Riley thought for a while and agreed to give the necessary magic stones in exchange for flowers. Immediately after that, the girl grabbed the guy's hands and began to thank him for his help. She said that she was afraid to lose the Duke's first gift, so his help was especially important. The guy was unaccustomed to such behavior, so he pulled his hand away. Schuer asked the wizard to handle camellia with care, as it was the Duke's first gift. She allowed the wizard to look after the flowers as much as she wanted, and she went on business. Riley noticed that any conversation with a girl began and ended with the Duke. Even he noticed that the girl's affection for Reynald was overflowing. However, the guy did not know whether these feelings could be called a manifestation of true love. After that, he once again carefully examined the camellia and created a magic circle for movement. The guy found it quite interesting that the power in this generation was inherited by two sisters at once. And at this time, our heroine ran around the estate and ignored all the requests of her servants. The girl rushed to her room to see the new flowers. Right on the rock, in front of the entrance to the huge chambers, she met the knight John. The man carefully opened the door to the girl's room, and she immediately smelled a floral aroma. There, in the middle of the room, opposite the entrance, stood the Duke, surrounded by hundreds of flowers. He noticed that the girl was already very late for the meeting promised to him. This painting was so beautiful that Schuer could not utter a word. The Duke did not expect that Riley would agree to look after the north, so he ordered a lot of flowers to be prepared. Our heroine looked at a huge number of flowers and worried about how many emotions her future husband would need. The Duke originally expected to go for a month, but with the help of a wizard, it could take a week. And the girl herself helped him a lot in confronting the black energy. The heroine asked her future husband to take a small step to the left, then take one of the hundreds of bouquets of flowers in your hands and turn for about 9 hours. Duke could not believe that the girl had asked for flowers just for the sake of it. But the Duchess was delighted with this perfect combination of black and red. Reynald did not expect such a reaction from the girl at all, so he just kept silent. The heroine was happy that after receiving magic stones, her gardening would go uphill. The Duke was surprised that the wizard would agree to give magic stones so easily. Before the girl could answer, a magic circle appeared behind her right in the air. In the next second, something fell from the ceiling and landed directly into the flowers. It turned out to be a young wizard from the tower, who fell directly to the floor. The Duke and Duchess didn't expect to see a guy here, so they were very surprised. The girl was most worried about the fact that the wizard fell right on her flowers. She began to cry because the guy had broken some of the flowers that the Duke had given her. She treasured her gift very much. She even prepared an album for bouquet wrappers. The wizard was surprised that a person who invested in mathematical stones collects plain paper. The girl literally sobbed and asked the wizard to return the paper to its original state. After that, the girl asked why Riley had come to this place so early in the first place. What he really wanted was the camellia flowers that were on the table during the meeting. The wizard was annoyed that the Duke's paper was more important to her than himself. The Duke did not want the girl to cry, so he took his handkerchief out of his pocket. He quickly handed it to the red-haired girl to wipe her tears with it. Duke Reynold explained that he often used this handkerchief, which pleased the girl. The man immediately guessed that the girl would want to take the handkerchief that had belonged to him for a long time. At first, she offered to exchange it for paper, but Reynold allowed him to take it for himself. A little later in the evening, the Duke looked out at the dark windows of his future wife's room. John approached the owner and announced that their preparations for the campaign were already completed. Sure pursued the Duke all day, and the wizard followed her around. Reynold was glad that the girl had calmed down and had to go to bed. About the same thing happened to Riley, who was also worried about the Duke. The man noticed that since the day he met his future wife, nothing has passed peacefully. He noticed that she was always in his sight, always in his thoughts, and it was better to have her by his side than to suffer somewhere far away. Therefore, he replied that he had long been accustomed to such an attitude towards himself. The remaining knights proudly greeted their commander before leaving for the expedition. The Duke remembered that the lady had asked to call the knights by name as a thank you. The guys immediately realized that all this happened thanks to their new owner. And she herself at this time was peacefully dozing in her bed, surrounded by bouquets. The girl woke up with a wrapper magazine in her hands the next morning. Schuer immediately realized that Reynold had already escaped to the expedition while she slept. At that moment, the maid came and asked what she should do with the remaining flowers, to which the Duke-Duchess remarked that she wanted to put them in jail and see what would happen. Sherry couldn't believe it because there were too many flowers around them even for the garden. However, our heroine was full of hope to make this garden come to life and bloom. Schuer asked her maid where the former Grand Duchess was from. However, she said that this is a very old story, so it is better to ask the Duke himself. Everyone in the manor loved their new mistress very much and wanted to help her in everything. The girl wanted to get acquainted with information about the North, so she asked the butler for reference materials. She wondered why the maids had such a strange reaction to this desire. The future Duchess said that she did not want to make mistakes if she stayed by the Duke's side. With this, she was able to kill the butler, who had been waiting for this request for a very long time. The man explained that he had to temporarily deal with the affairs of the late Duchess. The girl was impressed that this man had seen the childhood of the young Duke, and she was immediately interested in what kind of baby he was, to look at his young portrait. All this time, our heroine did not understand why the maids had such a reaction to the fact that the butler decided to tell everything from the very beginning. The man cleared his throat and began to tell the story of the entire family very quickly, starting with its very first representative. Meanwhile, in the northern mountains on an expedition, John noticed that something was wrong with his master. The man suddenly felt discomfort, as if someone was discussing him behind his back. However, he chalked up this strange feeling to the close presence of monsters. Meanwhile, the butler continued to tell the story, having already tired all the maids. Schuer allowed all the girls to go into the garden and not listen to his endless chatter. However, one of the two small daisies in her hands suddenly shone and exploded. The girl accidentally used her power on the flower and did not have time to react. Sherry asked the girl to be more careful because she was the only mistress of the North in the Duke's absence. At this time, our heroine looked out of the window and noticed that the wizard was standing right in the garden. So she gave the burnt chamomile to her assistant and went downstairs. The girl dreamed of seeing the wizard so much that she literally ran to meet him. However, she realized from afar that the guy had suddenly become somehow too tall. At the last moment, the man turned around and appeared in front of her as his more adult face. The Duchess even froze in surprise, not expecting to see him in such an unusual form. Riley scolded the girl for sneaking up on him too silently and getting scared every time. A large number of stones cannot be created quickly, so the wizard brought a few to begin with. The Duchess was very happy to help him, so she immediately thanked him. The girl was very glad that she decided to seek the help of this wizard. As a token of gratitude, she wanted to give him one of her first daisies. However, the experienced wizard immediately noticed that something was wrong with this flower. He managed to snatch the daisy from the girl's hands before the flower exploded. Schuer revealed that the Duke was going to wear a white uniform to their wedding, so she asked the wizard to make a recording stone. But then the girl was distracted by a servant girl, who reported that they had brought all the remaining flowers to the garden. After that, our heroine thanked the wizard again for his help and went to take care of the garden. At this time, the Duke was fighting a huge monster on top of a cliff. During the use of the sword energy, his emotions gradually disappeared completely. Some things annoyed him terribly, but he couldn't survive without them, so he hated this ability of his. At the same time, in the garden of the manor, work on the garden was in full swing. The young future Duchess commanded all the servants and knights, who planted flowers in different sectors together. By the time the Duke returned from the expedition, the entire garden was already filled with flowers. Now the girl sincerely understood the value of temperature magic stones. The wizard could not believe that he had to take off his robe in the north because of the heat. He even suggested that butterflies